Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Here's your host, Alex Klausner and Bobby Carney.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show podcast. This is our first little introductory episode, kind of giving you a little bit of what we're trying to do over here. My name is Bobby Carney. I will be one of the kind of hosts, speakers, one of the rotating voices on this show. With me today is Alex Klausner. He is also one of the co-hosts with this. So we just kind of wanted to give a little bit of a introduction to ourselves, why we're in Dynasty football, why we're doing this, and a little bit of kind of like our history, kind of things that we've done with our leagues. So Alex, start off a little bit first. You can kind of discuss a little bit of how we both got into Dynasty, because we both got into Dynasty together, if I remember right.
Oh yeah, it's all my fault. I think it started in 2014. We kind of I'd been kind of doing like standard leagues, and I guess that when I heard about Dynasty, I think it just really hit on the right level of football nerd for me. Because I think when I was playing regular fantasy, it was cool, but I liked I'd always been attracted to like the GM aspect of the game, the transactions, the team building aspect, the strategy of football. And I feel like Dynasty, because you're keeping your players year over year, as opposed to you're redrafting your team every year, you have so much more of that long-term view. To me, it almost feels like the sports version of playing the stock market, right? And so I was really attracted to that aspect of the game. And I found that once you and I really got into playing Dynasty and got experience with it, yeah, it really it allows you to get that deep. And especially as we started playing in more and more advanced leagues where we have the bigger rosters and we're introducing different scoring formats, different rules.
Taxi squads.
Taxi squads, exactly. Thinking of all of these different things that we can do with it and learning more about Dynasty, it just became that much more of like, yeah, this is the right game for me. Now I think I'm in 2 leagues with you. We co-own a team together, and then we have another league where we're competing against each other. So yeah, why don't you tell me about, some of your favorite successes that you've had with the game?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like going back a little bit to what you were saying about kind of like why you like Dynasty and why you keep doing it. The number one thing for me, I think, is also like it's when you win, you really feel like you've earned it. Like you're built like it's not like I feel like with redraft, I feel like sometimes it's just a lot of like you just got lucky. You didn't get the injury bug, you didn't get this, there's some lucky champions out there in redraft. Whereas like in Dynasty, it's like, well, yeah, I've built the depth to avoid the injury bug. I've invested in this guy through rookie draft and that type of stuff. So the winning, I feel like, is a lot more rewarding in that. As for kind of like the big, it goes in the DCL. DCL is the league where he was mentioning we're kind of in the same division. We're against each other. I joined that league season 2. It was kind of like there was a first year owner, and then he kind of backed out, so I kind of hopped in. I just remember the one thing he told me about the team. You have Le'Veon Bell coming off of that like crazy season, and then you have the number 1 pick. And that was the year of Saquon Barkley. So it was like I knew going in that team I was going to have Le'Veon Bell, Saquon Barkley. And then that is the year Le'Veon held out the entire year. So I did not have Le'Veon Bell, but I had Saquon Barkley, and then that's where he had his amazing rookie season. And I pretty much like gave in to like trading him. Like, hey, listen, there's a lot more holes to fill on this team. It was a last place team. So I had to pull up the trade tree. I think I've got it somewhere over here. Yes.
By the way, let me just point out the level while he's pulling that out. Let me just pull out the level
Yeah.
of nerd that you get into when you play Dynasty is you make
Yeah.
trade trees where you're literally tracking, okay, maybe I traded this guy, but what did I get in return? Now let's hear about the haul that Bobby got, the
Yeah.
King's ransom that's trading Saquon Barkley after his spectacular rookie season
Yeah.
gave him.
So I traded Saquon Barkley and Jarvis Landry. He was a little bit of like a tack on to get some extra picks. But I traded Saquon Barkley and Jarvis Landry for 104, 109, 204, 209. And then a second the following year in 2021, Deshaun Watson and Devontae Freeman at that time. So it was a haul. It was literally like I now have QB1. I've got multiple firsts, multiple seconds on top of like I was one of the worst teams in that league. So I already had another top 2, top 3 pick. So all those picks turned into J.K. Dobbins. Now, granted, one of them didn't pan out of Jalen Reagor, but there's also flipping Jalen Reagor down the road. Like, I'm not going to go into this full thing, but that trade tree in itself became its own trade tree of just all these picks and then all these players that turned into other trades and that type of stuff. But I will give you this stat because I had to look this up before we discuss this. My team in that league was 9-17 before trading Saquon Barkley. Since trading Saquon Barkley, I am 39-16. So that is, yes, it was a complete. That's why I always did some of the trade. Like, yes, I mean, I was able to flip Deshaun Watson after that for Joe Burrow, and there's a lot of those guys are not there in that. But why I still champion that trade is it was a team transformation trade. It was a worst to first transfer trade that has kept that team competitive still to this day. Is that trade. So that's a little bit about that one. What's like the trade or move that you're like championing the most?
I mean, for me, it's gotta be this one. So ironically, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, about trading and stuff like that, and kind of like why we're even doing the podcast.
Yeah.
I think for me, the move that I made that I just like am so, man, that felt good was last year when we are sitting in our draft at the 212, and there's all of these different players available to us. And a name popped into mind at that moment. And I was thinking, this guy really isn't even on this board. But this is the guy that I think has the best chance to produce out of all of these people. And it's a guy named Puka Nakua, who we kind of, I don't know. I just was like, I'm thinking Cooper Kupp is the receiver there. There's not really another option besides Van Jefferson, who I love. I love Van Jefferson. You and I,
Yes.
Bobby, little bit of
We're
background.
both UF
Florida
fans.
Gators.
We love our Van
Born
Jefferson.
and raised in Gainesville. We are Florida Gators, so we got a lot of love for Van Jefferson. But Van Jefferson hadn't really been a thing to that point. So I'm thinking,
Yeah.
hey, this Puka Nakua guy is kind of in this wide open receiver core. We can get him cheap here at the 212. It's the Mr. Irrelevant pick in this 2-round rookie draft. Let's get him.
Yeah.
Why not? And boy, did that feel good, because now you're sitting here spending 212, to have a true dynasty wide receiver one. It's Sean McVay's receiver. That feels good for the future, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like, yes, you and the team that we co-own, we both drafted Puka Nakua at 212, and then I took him late second in the Dynasty League that we're in the same, we're in different divisions. But the one thing that I think,
I feel a little crazy for not doubling down on that in that draft and kind of being like, well, let me go and diversify my portfolio. Let me get in on
Yeah.
some other. I should have just said, no, this is my guy. And I would have.
Yeah, but I think the thing is like when we've had like some of these draft talks, there's sometimes where it's like I might be high on a guy, you might be low on a guy, you might be high on a guy, I might be low on him. I think that was the one guy where like you're like, hey, his production in college, his physique, and like I was watching his tape and I'm like, this guy reminds me, because I'm a Bucks fan, reminds me too much of Mike Evans. Reminds me too much of Mike Evans. And his game just reminded, it was just like, especially that's another thing you have to think about along in Dynasties. Like, okay, cool. Maybe this guy's like a track star or something like that. But it's like, yeah, but once he's 30, that speed's gone. And it's like Puka's game just reminded me so much of like, this is a game of a guy that can play till he's 35. And when we were looking at like late second round pick, like that's what you love to have in someone at that pick, someone you can have a long time. And that was the funny thing is in both those leagues, like Puka went off, and it's like, why can't we find Puka in the waivers? And it's like, we both have him. Like, do not worry, and he's not going anywhere.
Right.
He's still on these teams. We're not listening to offers right now.
No, no, definitely not. I mean, I will say, and this is actually a great point, and a good segue. It is a good policy to always stay open for business. And we talked a
Yeah.
little bit earlier about your Saquon trade and what that meant for your team going forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you are one of those teams where you are at the bottom of the league year over year and you've got some great player, well, maybe it's time to think about making that deal, right? And then getting those assets and then maximizing those assets and creating more guys that you can go and you can trade for those King's ransoms. And you can just build your value over time. Now, that's a strategy. We are going to be on this podcast talking about strategy like that. We are going to be trying to help you find that next move to go make in your league that's going to help you build the value of your dynasty portfolio, build your roster, transform your team. Those are the kinds of things we're going to be trying to help you identify. I'm going to be sitting here trying to help you find that next Puka Nacua, right? I'm going to be sitting here trying to help you find the next Terry McLaurin or Cooper Kupp or that guy you can grab off the waiver wire that might be cheap. He might be nothing. He might be everything, right? But we're going to try to tell you when to sell high, when to sell low. That's the philosophy that I'm trying to bring to this thing. I want to help people get more informed on the market, right? Because to me, even though I'm saying my favorite move was like some dumpster dive acquisition that I made, I love the trade. To me, Dynasty is about the art of the deal. And if you're not trading, you're not trying in this game. Okay. You've got to be trying to move the pieces around the chessboard and build your roster in smart ways. And you've got to try to get ahead of the news, and we're going to try to help you stay in the know. So that's my thing. Bobby, what are you trying to bring to the table here?
Well, I think sometimes with Dynasty, it's very easy to just like look at your points that this guy scored and look at this and look at age. Just look at some of these numbers and like, oh, I'm not moving on with this guy, or oh, I got to sell this guy and stuff. And there's a lot of sometimes it's like there's stuff outside the score box. Like I know sometimes when we've talked about trades, it's like, well, yeah, like I think one of the guys we talked a little bit right now is Jalen McMillan for the Bucks. Like, well, he's wide receiver, right? He's wide receiver 3 right now in Tampa, but it's like, yeah, but next year he might not have Chris Godwin, and then in 2 years he might not have Mike Evans, and if nobody steps up to the plate, he's gonna be wide receiver 1 in 2026. And so there's things like that of like players' contracts are not gonna be showing up on the box score. And that's some things I think sometimes a lot of people forget, like aren't thinking about. They're just seeing stats, age, maybe pick value or something like that. There's some things like contracts and coaches and schemes and a lot of that stuff that people are not looking at. So I try to do my best with trying to keep that stuff in mind when I'm looking at deals and players. So hopefully I can at least bring some of that experience along with like, I won't get too into details of it, but like my former work was in football and coaching staffs and that type of stuff. So knowing a little bit of that and like analytics background, looking at that coach's film and that type of stuff, I have a little bit of that, like watching the tape and kind of seeing this, seeing that, seeing what teams are trying to do, trying to not do, and try to bring a little bit of that into the equation as well.
Absolutely, man. I think you nailed something, which was like talking about like coaching. That's definitely something I'm big on. This is a coach's game, right? It is not necessarily all just about the talent you have. You know,
Yeah.
a terrible coach can squander great talent when we've seen that happen a lot over time. So that is also something I definitely am going to be talking about a lot.
Yeah.
Want to real quick before we wrap up, just follow up with just hey, if you like what you've heard so far, give it a like, give it a subscribe, follow us on at Dynasty FF Show on all the social media. Shoot us a line, see what you thought. We'd love to say hi, and we'll
Yeah,
see you next
definitely.
time on the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps.